Get ready to need a big approach. Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for April 21st, 2025, and I am JD Duran. I am co-hostless for this episode. If you listen to the main show this last week, episode 633, we went in depth as to the reason why. Mostly it comes down to me being an utter buffoon because there was a scheduling mishap. Brendan told me that he was going to be unavailable for a certain time. I was trying to schedule guests for said episode. It didn't, and I totally forgot. I dropped the ball wholeheartedly. But I think it worked out great. I think it worked out perfect because we got a chance to talk about it on the main show a little bit. Brendan got to give us his thoughts on Ryan Coogler's latest in Sinners. And here I am. I have two guests joining me as we get to dive into this further. I get to double dip a little bit and double up on my sinning, if you will, which I'm very excited for. So joining me for this episode, we have the great Wonder Meg. Meg, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you back.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, especially this episode. I saw this movie last Monday, and I have been obsessed ever since. So really excited.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to get your thoughts on it. I told Meg I want you to be on the show. What movie are you excited for? And she did not hesitate. It took
No, I did
half
not.
a second for her to say Sinners. I want to be there for Coogler's new film. So we got her on the schedule. And I'm also glad that it worked out this way, as I noted, because I get to also hear from the wonderful Isaiah Washington back on the show. Isaiah, great to see you, my man. Thanks for being here.
Hey, it's great to see you too. I'm excited for this review. Of course, me and you, we've gone back between the film Twitter space for years now.
Yeah.
And this is I think the first time I'm here on In Session Film. It's an honor. I'm amazed and I'm excited.
Yeah. I know I'm fairly certain we've talked on Matt's show.
Yes.
I was gonna say I brought it up to Brendan on the main show, and I was like, I'm unless I'm gaslighting myself, we have just talked to each other on Next Best Picture. So I'm glad that you're able to confirm that. So yeah, I'm glad that you're here. I've always loved interacting with you on social media. It's great to see you, to hear your voice. I'm glad that you're here so we can talk a little Ryan Coogler. Before we get sinning and get into the vampire kissing and everything that goes on in this film, I want to hear your guys' thoughts on Ryan Coogler as a filmmaker. Where do you sit on him and his movies? Meg, we'll start with you.
Dude, love him. I absolutely love everything he's done, especially Creed. The first one is phenomenal, and the rest of them are very good too. But I think just Ryan Coogler has such a confidence to him, and you can really see it in the films that he makes. And it's a confidence that is very contagious. Like after I get done watching one of his movies, I'm like, oh yeah, like he did, like, this is amazing. I can do amazing things too. Like I love watching his movies for inspiration. I love the Black Panther movies as well. Wakanda Forever. I also love that one. Fruitvale Station. It's like he has never put out something that I don't like. So going into Sinners, I was like, this is my most anticipated movie of like the year. And I knew it was going to be good. I just, you just know it. And he really just, blew it out of the water. I think it was just amazing. But yeah, I love his movies. He's fairly young too, like he's 30, right?
Yeah.
31.
Yeah.
So absolutely incredible to have that kind of filmography so young. It's very inspiring.
Yeah. Isaiah, what about you?
Ryan Coogler, where do I start? Like, this is a guy who has been in my sphere for over a decade now. I remember actually going back when I was in middle school when Fruitvale Station came out. And then we transitioned into Creed, which I think is along with Top Gun Maverick, one of the greatest legacy sequels we have probably ever gotten,
Yeah.
at least in my opinion. And then
No,
we
you
go
are right.
on.
That is the correct opinion.
It is, yeah.
I'm in the right room. I'm in the right room.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we transition again into another elevated level of him and his Marvel phase. I am someone who not already went into Black Panther excited because I am someone who loves Marvel, and just the entire world building that he brings and that vision of Wakanda, creating a whole new world for beyond the comic book sphere fandom and into a whole new audience who's not really recognizable with that world of Wakanda, the sets, the costumes, the language, the character work. From a writing perspective, that might be my favorite screenplay that he's ever had credits to. And of course, we go into Wakanda Forever, which I still look back at that movie and I'm thinking to myself, with all due respect, this film should not have worked. Through the, and I say this with all due respect, production hell that looked upon from the articles and the reports that was going on, of course, with the untimely death of Chadwick Boseman, a lot of things that hit with COVID, and some of just the entire world building of the MCU that you have to apply and abide by. It had to just recreate its blueprints, and he manages to make a pretty good sequel, not as great as its predecessor, but just on its own merits. The fact that that film was even good, I think, is just a beautiful just crescendo of sigh of relief that was anticipating throughout 2022 going into November, I believe the year that came out. And I just admired this guy's passion, not only for cinema, but for his own voice as an African American, and that inspires me as an African American, and how he goes about not only just keeping it real, but also bringing a new twist and turn to how it is depicted in today's generation, while also bringing homage and love for past generations. And just the entire craftsmanship of how he just builds relationships. Like you see the relationship that he built with Ludwig Göransson, not just with him as a college roommate, but also within Creed and how that got started, or his relationships with other crafts department like Ruthie Carter, Hannah Beachler. You go into, of course, recently with Wakanda Forever, I believe Arkapaw, who is also his DP for Sinners. It's like it kind of felt like this like Avengers initiative in a sense, where like each film is like recruiting, building relationships for what I think Sinners is to be this climactic phase of his career where he truly comes into form of originality and how he goes about his storytelling, which is ironic because he's not really known for original storytelling, all due respect. I mean, Fruitvale Station, based off of a true story, Creed, legacy sequel, Black Panther, IP, adaptation from comic books in a pre-established universe. But yes, concluding my opening thoughts on him, I just love him, and he's one of the greatest directors I think we have in the game to break through from the 2010s.
Yep. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you guys and echo a lot of your sentiments. I think he's one of the best we have working right now, even though he's only made a handful of films each, and every one of them have been impactful in some ways. I really do love Fruitvale Station. I love the small intimacy of that film. I know Black Panther is the film that hit the zeitgeist in this huge way, went on to get a Best Picture nomination, and it had some awards recognition. Clearly was one of the defining films of 2018. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever was another big movie. You are right, Isaiah. I agree with what you're saying in terms of him somewhat being stuck within the Marvel formula when making those movies. And you certainly can tell when those constraints come about in those films. I think particularly of the third act of Black Panther, or in Wakanda Forever, it is very, very clear in that film that Coogler is more interested in character motivation and the film's themes on colonialism. And that is rubbing up against the larger MCU of it all. And yeah, he's having to butt heads a little bit with Feige in that regard. I think both of those movies are still really good, particularly the first Black Panther, I think is great. Creed, on the other hand, I think is by far the best of his IP work. It's not even close as far as I'm concerned. Creed is one of the best films of 2015. And I don't know if this is crazy to say. It might be the best Rocky movie. Like of that whole franchise.
Yeah.
I would
you
go
know
that
what?
high.
You know what? I agree. Let's do this. I agree. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, that film is great. It has Coogler's imprint all over it. He makes it his own despite how familiar it might be in some ways to the Rocky franchise. But it has his DNA all over it, and it's embedded with this deep, deep pathos that I think is extremely poignant and wonderful in that film. I absolutely adore it. Creed, up until Sinners, was the best film for me as far as Ryan Coogler goes. But I think the 4 preceding films were varying degrees of good to excellent. And he is one of the better that we have working today. And as we get into Sinners, I think we will all agree where he goes from here. Oh boy, watch out. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. With all of that laid out, let's go ahead and transition into his latest, Sinners, an American period horror film set in the Mississippi Delta in 1932. This is written and directed by Ryan Coogler, of course. It stars Michael B. Jordan, Haley Steinfeld, Miles Catton, Jack O'Connell, Wunmi Mosaku, Omar Miller, Delroy Lindo, Lee Jun Lee, and others that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with Sinners, you're probably not listening to this, but just in case, trying to leave their troubled lives behind, twin brothers return to their hometown to start again, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. Okay, as we get into this, a fair warning, we will probably delve into some spoilers here with Sinners, given how dense this film is and everything that it has to offer. It is really hard to have a full conversation without giving some detail away. So fair warning, as this conversation goes, we'll probably get into some spoilers with it. With that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. We'll start with you, Meg. What did you think about Sinners?
Oh my goodness. I I I remember sitting, I was probably 20 minutes into the movie and I was like, this is exactly what I wanted from this movie. And that at that point, we're only 20 minutes in, but I fell so in love with these two brothers as they were, traveling across their hometown, like Isaiah said, like collecting Avengers almost to open up their juke joint and learning about their lives through these experiences with these other characters like Cornbread and stuff. I thought his their first exchange was probably my favorite, of him wrangling up his friends. But yeah, I mean, I loved it. The cinematography is phenomenal. The score it's hard to pick my favorite part about the movie, but the score I think might be my
it's so
favorite
good.
right now,
Yeah.
because it's so dynamic. Like there's so many different sounds and experiences that you feel when you're listening to just the score, and then you watch it with the movie and it's just like, psh, forget about it. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Michael B. Jordan does a phenomenal job in this movie playing two brothers. He makes them both very distinctly different in very small ways. I think maybe even the way he carries himself, the way his face moves, amazing. Haley Steinfeld is great in this, but Delroy Lindo, has to be my favorite part of the movie. He's my
Mm,
favorite performance,
mm.
especially towards the end of the film. What he does, I just found so beautiful. This might be my favorite Coogler movie. I do have to, I mean, I will probably have to rewatch everything else. Uh, but right now, this is my favorite. It's got vampires, love vampires. We just did our women in session about vampires. So we
Mhm.
did that right before I saw this, and I'm like, dang, if only I would have saw this before. Dang it.
We got to redo the show,
I know, we
everybody.
gotta do it again. Um, but I really do think Sinners is Ryan Coogler at most ambitious, and each ambitious swing he takes totally pays off for me. So
Nice. Isaiah?
So, JD, what if I were to tell you that I'm not really a big fan of the horror genre?
Okay.
Not really.
Yeah.
So, going into this movie, it wasn't one of my most anticipated films of the year, but it
Okay.
was something that I was definitely eyeing out for because every now and then there is just that one horror picture almost every year that always just hooks me, whether it
Uh-huh.
was last year's The Substance or you go back to 2017 with Jordan Peele's Get Out, that just sticks with me for a very
Sure.
long time.
Mhm.
Sinners joins that groups of horror films that I have to just go out of my way and say, this is above and beyond what we normally get in this type of genre. I think Ryan Coogler is not only spreading his wings from an originality perspective in the way how he depicts this world of 1932, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mississippi South, Jim Crow
Yep.
law days,
Yep.
and intertwining multiple genres to combine one large, like suspenseful horror film, but is not afraid to go into the history aspect, is not afraid to go into the gangster aspect. The first half of this film, it's kind of a gangster film that is a drama that
Mm.
builds and kind of just marinates in the simmering build up to these two twin brothers, Smoke and Stack, wonderfully portrayed by Michael B. Jordan. In my opinion, maybe his best performance of his career, and just having this duality of a role between two coin opposite brothers who are in one accord and aligned, but kind of have their own distinctions. This is not a lazily written or lazily performance where it's just two people who are the same. It
Yeah.
goes into great depths of character writing, not just for them, but just everybody else who's introduced into this story. Kugler takes so much time, effort,
Mhm.
care into being able to allow you to have a wanting love of charisma for everybody, even some of the characters who don't exactly warrant love, let's say the vampire characters, but Jack O'Connell's Ramek character, I think, is just so well layered. It's not a typical type of villain that is just mustache twirling. There's a motivation, there's an understandability. I was surprised to realize that he technically isn't even the true villain. He's more of an opportunist who comes in a way that is so riveting in how he works with material from Kugler that is depicting a very progressive sense of white savior narrative that I never thought I would see as great from Get Out and its depiction of racism, but in a very incognito sense that it's very subtle. The music of this film, it's a love letter to blues and southern music. Not just that, but
Mhm.
also other types of music too.
Sure.
There is, of course, a scene, we'll get to that scene, that just goes off the walls in terms of being so richly inclusive towards the history, past and present of music, mostly to African Americans, but also within other forms that is infectious. I do agree with Megan. There's something infectious about this and care, even into European white music, that I'm thinking to myself, okay, they're going to like not show great representation of it because of that kind of trope of when the white person tries to fit in with the black people with their what they have to offer. It's kind of like, oh no, that sucks. It's garbage. It is whack. No, it's beautiful. And to wrap up my opening thoughts of Sinners, I don't think it's necessarily a masterpiece. There are elements specifically in the first half that kind of does a worthwhile take of a decision that also kind of affects the pacing in a sense that it decides to kind of let the vampire story take a back seat, and you really don't get the trueness of the vampire spectacle until the midpoint of the film, which is it's 100% worth it, but it's kind of sacrificing something that has well shot scenes, great impeccable direction, beautiful blocking. But I kind of did wonder to myself, when are we really going to get into what this movie is selling? And that is a bunch of black folks just mowing down vampires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know if it's because I'm riding the wave at the current moment and I'm just on a high, but I think this is one of the best films of the decade so far.
Yeah.
I love this film. I love it.
Understandable.
I
100%.
think we just saw Coogler hit a completely different gear. There is so much to this film to unpack for sure. There's one scene that we'll get into that I think is up there as far as one of the best scenes of the decade. I love this film wholeheartedly. Its ambition, the way it blends genres, the craft on display, the performances, it is all utterly masterful as far as I'm concerned. It is thematically dense and extremely rich. The characters are wholly captivating. On one hand, I do want to call this a masterpiece, but to your point, Isaiah, it's also a really messy movie with a lot of moving parts. So it's this very rare breed of movie that is perfectly imperfect. It is a messy masterpiece, and I wouldn't have it any other way. What Ryan Coogler does here is nothing short of stunning. On one hand, it is this sexy and seductive Southern Gothic vampire movie, but it's also this soulful and exquisite music movie illuminating the deep connection of blues to the black community, with Coogler somehow fusing those genres together seamlessly. But what's even more astounding is how those varying aesthetics and styles work congruently on a metaphorical level to examine the black diasporic experience, assimilation and passing, the parallels to Irish colonization, and ultimately how Rennick's offer of eternal life is symbolic of looting black musicianship. It is truly phenomenal how all of that comes together here. Not to mention how the film includes the deep ties to East Asians in the black community in the Delta, the superstitions and myth that live on in the bayou, and even what Native American vampire hunters mean as far as their role in all of this. There is so much to unpack. It is a rich, dense movie that is all wrapped up in a messy vampire that is badass. This is maybe the greatest example of the power of execution, because from moment to moment, despite how we arrive there, the film's execution, I think, is pristine. Every scene is engrossing and evocative in the production and how the characters are manifested and how the themes underneath the action comes to life. I love this film deeply. I adored it. I cannot wait to see it again.
For sure, man, for sure. And I definitely think you make a good point in terms of just some of the representation that Coogler does. And I feel like in the hands of another average studio director or someone who's still in the process of trying to be an auteur, there are certain decisions, certain ticks and beats that I don't think would have worked as well. You mentioned about Southern Asians here. I feel like in the hands of another director, I was really expecting to hear that like typical Hollywood Chinese Asian accent, but the moment that they started speaking Southern, I was just like, holy God, we are in for something special. And
Yeah.
I owe a debt to Ryan Coogler for continuing to be those men who shows how many times Native Americans truly are the smartest ones in certain cases.
Yeah.
Whereas,
I want to see the prequel. I know we
Yeah.
live in a world of sequel and prequels, and Coogler has done that before, I guess, when we're talking about sequels and legacy films.
Vampire Hunters.
I kind of want to see the Native American Vampire Hunter movie. Sounds awesome.
I'll give you that.
Yeah. Well, I also agree with what you said, Isaiah, about how anyone else's hands. Like in my review, I put like that Coogler elevates this movie because he's Ryan Coogler, you know.
Yes.
And what I really appreciated, which you touched on a little bit, was that they didn't try to water down any of those accents or the cadence of Southern accents or people that come from other countries, because it really puts you in that space. I'm from Michigan, so we don't really I don't really come into contact with a lot of people that have an accent other than, you know, like a northern one. So
Yeah, I was
when
going to
you're
say, Meg, come to Florida,
Yeah.
and Floridians here will make fun of our accent.
Yeah. So like when you first watch it, it's a little bit jarring to try to get your traction while you're okay, what did he say? What did he say? What's that word? And which I really appreciated because it gets you in that zone. And any issues I had kind of narratively the first time I watched it, the second time I was totally locked in because I already knew what to expect from, like, you don't need to 100% know what they're saying, just go with their vibe, you know? So and I really appreciated that because I feel like you said, this movie in the hands of somebody else, I just don't feel like it probably would have worked as well.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And everything in this film, whether it comes down to dialect, the performances, and how they are directed here, it all comes down to the nucleus of this film and Ryan Coogler's messaging, which I think is utterly brilliant. I think this is one of the most thoughtful and provocative explorations of assimilation I've maybe ever seen, as it also tackles the allure of, you know, the allure and consequences of cultural appropriation. It's also about the power of music as a way of healing and bringing communities together. The blues as a cipher for those ideas here is incredibly poignant, given the history of that genre and how it functions as a means of not only expression, but connecting spiritually, which, as the film suggests, gives way to both ancestral and malevolent forces. It's why the barn burning sequence is so goddamn brilliant, because we do see Sammy transcending time and space and demonstrating the profundity of music, but simultaneously that's what attracts Rennick to the party. And it cannot be overstated. The use of Irish colonization to symbolically tap into the dangers of assimilation is nothing short of brilliant. Not to make this a history lesson, but it's worth reiterating. There are many similarities between the Irish and Black people. Both groups have been victims of systemic oppression. However, rather than uniting over their shared experiences, many Irish Americans recognized assimilation as an effective solution in the exact same way that Remick sees vampirism as a means of escape. And Coogler gives us clues that Remick is old Irish, meaning that he's hundreds of years old. So he understands deeply the struggle that these characters are facing. He empathizes with and even empowers the Black diasporic experience. He wants to give them an eternal life where they can be free of their anguish, which is why the Rocky Road to Dublin sequence is so freaking incredible here as well. Remick wants to exhibit that there's equally a deep allure to his music and culture. And I think that is so effective cinematically, But that's also wherein lies the rub. That sequence also demonstrates how the Irish could assimilate and allow others to access their culture without losing ownership of it, while Black culture does not have that same luxury, as exemplified by Remick trying to appropriate Sammy's musicianship. As a thematic exercise, it is stunningly masterful. It is incredible what Coogler does here, and bringing out these incredible textures with those ideas without ever losing sight that this is a fun gangster vampire film in the Mississippi Delta. Like it's incredible how the film gets to have its cake and eat it too.
There's a triangular approach to this entire narrative, JD. I do. First of all, please continue to be the Professor JD of the history lesson. We need it, bro, because that's what the one of the backbone themes of this film is. And the reason why I would use the term triangular is because the film is juggling a lot. I know we mentioned how in some ways that juggling kind of minorly works against it, but when it is at its high, when you balance those themes of this very religious framework that the film brings into these vampires, who kind of bring, in a sense, like this anti-false salvation that is offered to these African-American characters, and not just African-American characters, but other characters that have come to a place of oppression. Like you even see Grace character, who's not African-American, but is an Asian woman. There is that offering to her, or even in the same similar sense to someone like Mary, who, yes, is a predominantly white woman, but has had a grandfather who was, if I'm not mistaken, one of her grandfathers who was mixed, and who has found herself in basically the invited to the cookout type of character in that space with these people. And when you also apply that into the historic of the cultural appropriation into music, and how that all intertwines and works together in this, and I said earlier, this white savior complex that has been embedded within America for years. It's sympathetic and understandable, where you see this situation where you see people who has so much to give to the world, so much soul, so much promise, so much just God-given gifts that is just unexplainable. Similar to how I felt about Get Out, where it's just it kind of lust, in a sense, which is ironic given the sexualization of this film. It's like
there are a lot of comparisons to be made to Get Out, for sure.
There's like this lustful, like, admiration that is seen from Remick's perspective towards African Americans, and where it's fascination of so much to the point where it's almost you kind of want to be us, but not really represent the struggle or represent your own privilege that you have. And you see that then later on in the film, when it starts to get more deeper and layered, and in the words of Benoit Blanc, you're peeling back the layers, and we're starting to see the true colors of this strange mystery that goes so heavy-handed in a great way, with tying in the soulful music, the historical racist history lesson, as well with the religious themes of this idea of temptation of the African American going into a system that promises it this sense of salvation, but in reality, it comes with a price that makes them kind of trapped in quote unquote free, but free under their conditions and under their way of how to look at it. It's not true freedom versus the freedom that we were fighting for, even in a post-slavery but Jim Crow law days.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're talking about there, as far as Remick and his involvement here. I think what's so compelling about him. And we can certainly talk about the parallels of this to Get Out, because there are comparisons to be made for sure. Ultimately, in the end, there are these distinct differences. But as it relates to Remick and how he can be interpreted here, I do think there is a double edged sword to him. And I think what's brilliant about the character, as far as I'm concerned, right? He's this old Irish vampire that's been around for a long time. And the symbolic fortitude of him as it relates to assimilation and appropriation and making a deal with the devil, so to speak.
Mhm.
I love all of that here, even if that is clear cut what Coogler is going for. But I do think there are nuances that make the character really striking, because this is someone who has seen all of this before, and he genuinely empathizes with the pain and struggle that these characters are facing. Again, he wants to give them freedom, as we're talking about. He wants to build a community founded on living eternally with no hatred and having music as a healer. And that is appealing. Who wouldn't want that? I can see the allure, the temptation. That sounds kind of great. Certainly better than the hell of American racism. So when he hears Sammy's music, of course he wants that to be a part of his community. Did he go about it in the most violent way possible? Absolutely. He is a vampire after all. But his intentions are logical and understandable. It's hard not to see why some would easily succumb to the temptation he provides. On the flip side of that coin, though, when Remick first approaches the juke joint, he says something to the effect of, "We just want to join you folks," in this affable, endearing way, which on a symbolic note could be representative of how white inclusion in black spaces usually lead to something destructive, to your point, Isaiah. So maybe Remick's schemes are nothing more than a ruse to destroy and appropriate, and he's just taking as many victims with him as he can. I don't know if I personally read it that way, but I can understand why that cynicism would be appealing to some audiences. And I think because of how Coogler writes him and how Jack O'Connell performs the character, I think it could be interpreted either way. I think you can look at him as this old Irish empathetic figure who sees the same thing happening in the Mississippi Delta that he did in the old Irish Republic, and sees music as a way to bring everyone together. He just goes about it in the wrong ways. Or it's all a ruse and he's just an evil vampire. It literally could be both, like both of those interpretations. And that to me is just the brilliance of the writing here.
Yeah, I also wanted to touch on how this movie, if it was about any other kind of, monster, like if instead of vampires, it was werewolves or something, it just wouldn't work as well, because Coogler takes all of the best and most terrifying aspects of vampirism and puts it into the movie. They're
Totally
empathetic,
agree.
they're
Yeah.
empathetic predators. They a wolf in sheep's clothing. They tell you they tell you exactly what you want to hear without telling you the bad bits. And I
Yeah.
think Remick is like the perfect example of it. He's a friendly looking face, but he has a little bit that's making you go, I don't know. He's almost too charming. He's almost too nice. He's saying too many of the good things. And the vampires worm their way into your brain, and they check all the boxes of, oh, this guy's telling me that I can live forever in basically a heaven on earth. Why wouldn't I do this? Why would I continue to suffer in this the way I'm living now? Why wouldn't I have eternal togetherness with my friends and my family? And I think that the way they explore it through the twins is great.
Yeah.
Getting into a little bit of it's not a little bit, a big spoiler, is they basically see each other as a vampire. You know, you see
Yeah.
yourself turning into something that you don't recognize, but you sound the same, you look the same.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that the way that he explores that is brilliant. And I don't
Yeah.
think that if it was any other kind of monster, like I said, a werewolf or, you know, turning into a zombie or something,
Yeah.
I don't think that it would have been as impactful.
Yeah, I agree. That is the dangers of assimilation. You
Yeah.
become something you don't recognize, even if the allure is appealing. It might sound great, but there are ramifications that maybe you don't
Hmm.
see or understand. And how that tethers to the music here is another component that just adds to the profundity of it. But I agree with you. That is to say, that's why vampirism is such a perfect
Hmm.
analogy here for what Coogler is trying to say. It is,
And they're
I
so
don't know, I love
scary
it.
the whole movie.
Yeah, yeah, it
At
is.
least
Yeah,
I felt their presence the entire time. Like, I mean, it's
Mhm.
mostly because of the marketing, you know that there's going to be vampires in it.
yeah,
So the entire time, once you kind of find out that the movie is only going to take place during like the time span of a day, like 24 hours,
uh,
let's say, you're like,
yeah,
okay, well, as soon as that sun goes down, I mean, double meaning there too, you know, as soon as the sun goes down, it gets horrible. Like, it's horrible out there for them. And
yeah,
adding vampires into the mix,
yeah,
I was so like, you
yeah,
know, you feel their presence the entire time, especially when he shows up, and he has that scene with the couple, um, and you're like, "Oh, alright, he's gonna show up again with a vengeance," and then you just wait for it. You sit there and wait, like, all of these things are happening, they're putting their, juke joint together, and you're like, "Alright, when are they gonna show up?" And then, you know, they just stroll up
yeah,
there, and it is so effective because
yeah,
even if he doesn't have a lot of screen time, you know that he's business. Like, you know
hmm,
that when he
Mhm.
shows up, it's gonna get nuts. And it
yeah,
does. It
yeah.
definitely does.
It absolutely does,
Great.
and I love that. And sorry to cut in once
You're
again,
fine.
and I'll let you
You
go,
know?
Isaiah.
You know?
But I also love how he takes that back seat as far as this juke joint goes, like how it does give these characters some sort of power because he
Mhm.
doesn't force his way inside. He has to
Mm-mm.
let them in, if you will.
Mhm.
And love that as a vampire trope. But it works so great here on a thematic level as well. He wasn't going to force his way in. He wanted to be invited, which to me speaks to how he saw this genuinely as something he wanted to build around his community. He didn't want to force it. He wanted them to see the allure of his community, of Remic's community.
He's
And I do love how Coogler builds that in, that this juke joint, which is this intimate black space, it does give these characters agency. And it's not until there's the invite when they kind of stroll in and chaos ensues. Uh, just
sometimes
another brilliant touch of the film. Yeah.
I just kind of at a certain point, this might go a little too deep into it. Maybe I'm overlooking it, but he kind of came off at times as kind of like this. I wouldn't say exactly, but like an allegory to like this antichrist like figure where there's this guy, I'm the way, I'm the truth. What I represent is the way of the truth. I
Mhm.
have my people here, my disciples that follow me, and they are going to tell you, yeah, it's all that in a bag of chips. And like, I'm not going to force it on you, but I'm going to show you how it
Mhm.
all is going to go down, even though there's kind of like this
Mhm.
evil that's lurking. I mean, even the scene with, what is it called again? I think it's Pick, Pour, Robbing, Clean scene where they're performing in front of the juke joint before things really get bad. I'm watching that scene and I'm kind of along with Stack. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of digging it. It's a little good. This is really good. I think it's going to suck. But you're also reminded with Smoke's character that no, like something's off. And it's a great like adversary because what makes it so ironic that I say this antichrist like figure, Smoke and Stack, they are not righteous characters. No, they're not. If we're really being genuinely honest, I'm thinking going into this film that, okay, they're gangsters, but maybe they're going to be like these anti-heroes. No, 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 that's not who they are. They are very morally questionable characters that, yes, do endure an arc of redemption, but they also kind of have their dirtiness too, where you go into the whole idea of the title of sinners. These guys, they cheat other people off. They really are not doing this juke joint, in all honesty, for the people or for the community to give back to the community. No, they're really doing it just for money in their pockets, because what happened going into Chicago didn't really work out that well. And it was really nice to see a depiction of a protagonist in a type of film like this that's African American, who's not like this wholly righteous type of character who has all of the great signs of moral justice within them. A lot of times they're kind of doing it for themselves. It's not until when crap hits the fan where now they're starting to think of others. But even then, when they're thinking of others, like even when you look at Smoke's character, this guy who's been through so much trauma, so much pain, and has a hardened heart to the point where he really does not get too familiar with anybody other than his own brother. He does not. His own lover, played by Masaku, Annie's character, who's also a great addition to this.
Yeah, I love Danny here.
Yeah.
She gives so much grace, so much insight, so much love within him. And even then, he still kind of is distant. And to have this guy be the one that you follow with military experience, so much swagger, charisma, but also kind of this unpredictable nature, to the point where even he pulls a weapon on his own family member, blood, with Sammy, just so you have that reminder that I'm a guy who is led by loyalty, not by blood. And to see all of that, but have that wonderful arc at the end where he finally learns how to love and learns how to defend others and put others before himself, not just his brothers and sisters, but also himself, in that humility of, I'm going to do this for them, not for me.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I'm going to be really curious to revisit this film and look at it through that prism, going back to your interpretation of the twins here, because I'll be perfectly honest, I had the antithetical interpretation of this, but maybe it's because I was looking at those parallels between Black and Irish oppression. And I do think there is a purposeful contrast. Again, circling back to what we were saying earlier about Remick being representative of one of the marginalized groups here, and his ideology of what freedom is and his response to persecution. I think the flip side of that coin is Smoke and Stack, and how they respond by using or potentially using violence to steal from the mob, essentially, and are using that wealth to give back to the Black community. Now, to your point, it is funneled through the prism of capitalism, so they're not exactly Robin Hood.
No.
But they're more like Robin Hood in the sense that the wealth they've accumulated through, precarious means, by being gangsters in Chicago, they're using that to build this juke joint for the community that, as we just noted a moment ago, becomes a safe haven once the vampires are unleashed onto them. So I do think Coogler is doing something there as far as that contrast is concerned. But like I said, I'd be curious to look at the film from that perspective on a rewatch. I've only seen the film the one time, but that was my initial reading of it.
No, that's a great point of view. Sorry, man.
Yeah, no. For me, when I first watched the movie, I could not get the comparison of the Cray brothers. I don't know if you
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
from
yeah,
Legend,
yeah.
both played by Tom Hardy, a dual
Mm-hmm.
role, but they have a lot of, similarities, both, sets of brothers, are not without sin, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
but, they're not
yeah,
without sin, they have a similar end goal of, like, success and, but their motivations and their intentions are pretty different. One of the Cray brothers is very erratic, and the other is more calm and business savvy. So a lot of their similarities I see here, and I'm pretty sure I forget. I think Ryan Coogler was on a podcast recently. I don't remember which one, but he actually was talking about how he used the Cray brothers for inspiration
mm.
for
Okay, yeah,
the more gangster
yeah,
aspects
makes
of the
sense.
brothers. And as soon as I learned that, I was like, I knew it. I knew I wasn't crazy. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I think that their characterization in this movie is done so well because again, they have similarities, and but they are pretty different in the way they go about things. One is more concerned about, pinching the pennies. We have to get exactly the amount of money that we need from,
yeah,
if this drink is 10 cents, we should be getting 10 cents for it.
yeah,
But the other brother, he's more like, he wants the community to feel more welcomed, and if this is all they
yeah.
have, this is all they have to pay for it. And I think that it shows, uh, there's so many themes in this movie that I just
Mm.
every time I watch it, I'm like, "Oh, here's another one, here's another one." But,
Yeah.
what the second time I watched it, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I can see his inspiration from the Cray brothers in this for sure," and, it made me appreciate the movie Legend a little bit more too, so
Yeah, and I love that element of it. I think
yeah.
that dynamic with Michael B. Jordan and his performance is fantastic, and also why I go back to it is a messy movie because you
Mhm.
have the gangster element of it that Coogler is trying to fuse into the larger allegory and the vampirism at play, and it is kind of all over the place. But I
Mhm.
think it is masterful in its messiness, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
because I do think that dynamic with the twins and how that alone maybe gives nuance. Maybe the answer, Isaiah, is that both of our readings of the film is kind of right because you do
Yeah.
get both of those perspectives from Smoke and Stack respectively. And how that simultaneously contrasts Remick and his Irish perspective, I think that's still also very much at play. So you do have all of these parts kind of fusing together, and even though it's kind of messy, it all makes sense still. I think there's a cogency to it, and I love that in execution. I think it is utterly brilliant in it, and it that like the crime gangster aesthetic here, how that fuses with this being a vampire movie. It sounds so weird out of context. Like when you just say it out loud, it's like, man, there's no way that works, right? But like you watch the movie, you're like, no, this all is perfectly well balanced. I think it's crazy.
Yeah,
Speaking of,
like, I was telling my boyfriend after the movie, I was like, if you wanted to go into this with just watching like, if you were just going into this wanting a vampire movie, you'll get that. And if you
Mm,
just went into this movie wanting a gangster movie, you'd
you'll
get that.
you get that too, yeah.
But but somehow the way he, puts it all together, no anyone that watches it will be satisfied, with what they're looking for.
Mm.
And I think that that is just yeah, it's a little messy sometimes, but that's why it works. Like,
I
that
wouldn't
is
change anything about it.
yeah, no, no,
Yeah,
no, me either. Like, I
yeah,
honestly as soon as, it was done and credit scene was over, I was like, I immediately could watch that again, like, it
yeah,
play it back, like, right now because,
yeah.
I don't ever get tired of it, like, I was
Same.
actively looking for, like, the next soonest showtime that I could make work to go see it again, and again, like,
Yeah.
today, I was sitting here, I was like, "Man, I wonder if I could get in another viewing before we record," because, it's
I
just
have
that
no idea.
Could
good.
have.
It
Yeah,
is just that good.
yeah. And
Speaking
to
of that good,
oh, go ahead, Isaiah. Go ahead.
JD, I ain't gonna hold you. There's one specific performance that we have not gotten to yet, that for many people is their MVP, which I understand. We were talking about like balance and layers. Miles Caton's performance as
Hmm.
It's
I'm
good, real good.
genuinely just at all. I'm trying to remember the last time I saw a debut performance that struck me this severely hard. Maybe not since the last time I can remember Yelitsa Aparicio for Roma. Now, this guy, of course, has singing experience. If he was a background vocalist on tour with her, if you don't know her, R&B artist who, for the cinephile community, famously won an Academy Award for Fight for You for Judas and the Black Messiah, and he had to learn blues and how to play the guitars in that old Southern style way for about 2 months before this role. And for a guy with literally no type of blockbuster or professional, like mainstream acting experience, I think he goes above and beyond and holds his own, and even at times steals the show from these well experienced actors like Delroy Lindo, surprisingly, or even Michael B. Jordan, and even being able to perfectly just display his struggles of someone who, of course, was raised in the church, but also has this artistic drive to go beyond the church walls and really just take and share his work with the world. That's something that I personally relate to even to this day. And it's, I just do not understand how could one just embody just such three-dimensional presence, and so much to the point where he just is able to come above and beyond, ironically kind of as the film's hero in a sense, even though he's not the, in my opinion, he's not the lead. He's a big supporting character, but he's the heart of the film, which I was not really expecting.
Yeah. I what's so incredible about Miles Cant and his performance here, and I don't say this as a slight to the great Timothy Chalamet, but I think this film succeeds where a complete unknown fails, at least for me. I didn't love that film.
Understandable. Understandable.
The response that I had to Canton here is what that film, A Complete Unknown, was going for. And I think collectively, given our responses, I think we've all shared that experience. And I love how they fuse that into the film where there's that moment in the car. And I can't remember which twin it was. Was it Stack?
I believe
think it was Stack.
Stack. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sammy in the car, and he starts singing, and his mind is blown, and everyone in the audience is having the same reaction, like, holy Lord, this is incredible. Wow. And then it leads, and the way this film weaves music throughout, and it really does become a musical at some point in the film. It's really quite incredible. We've gone almost an hour here without mentioning what is maybe the scene of the decade so far. It is unbelievable, this barn burning sequence that takes place midway through the film, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's this moment of magical realism, this surrealistic dreamscape that fuses past, present, and future generations of music combined into this one moment to tell the history of Black music and how one has informed the other along the way. It is deeply soulful. It is poignant. The craft is stunning. The camera work, it is mind-blowing. It is incredible. And as much as I want to praise Coogler in his direction for the moment and Ludwig's music, what Göransson does with the score, I believe you noted earlier, Meg, it is truly unreal. It is astonishing what he does with the music here. But that whole sequence begins with Canton getting up there, doing his thing, and throughout the number just continues to bellow in this wonderful, wonderful, soulful way that is incredible. Like, without that performance, I don't know if that scene echoes the way that it does. As great as everything else is, he's kind of the beating heart of it. And it like, as you guys noted earlier, in the hands of anyone else, it doesn't work. But with Coogler and Ludwig at the core here, and the inclusion of Ken and his abilities as a singer, my God, it is breathtaking. One of the most breathtaking moments of cinema I've maybe ever seen.
Man, I have to say, I want to make this quick because Meg, I have a feeling you got something to say too. But like I said in my opening thoughts, it's like this scene was the culmination of this guy's career, because technically he just lets everybody just have a moment to shine, whether it's Ruth E. Carter's costume design capturing both the history, present, and like of course future of the time period. Hannah Beach's art direction, setting a scene for Archipaw's just camera work. One of the best, I'm just going to say it, one of the best use of a one take I've ever seen, or what made it look like a one take. I'm not sure if they did it all in one take, but whatever. It was fabulous and fantastic. I even go into Steve Bodecker, who is a sound mixer that Coogler's been working with, if I'm not mistaken, since Black Panther. The way how he oversees the mixing of different types of genres, whether it's within, you go back to an African traditions in various countries with the drums, the 80s DJ, that 2010s hip hop trap era, or even within some of the uses of the strings instrumentation of ancient Asian culture. Like everything about that scene just excels and exceeds from a technical perspective. And even I gotta even say, even the extras in the background, everybody is working off on firing off all cylinders. It makes no sense. This scene was not supposed to work because, again, I know we sound like a broken record in the hands of someone else. This scene is ambitious on paper, but they could have easily messed up some dude entering the frame with a guitar.
It's extremely well choreographed.
Yeah.
I wish I was a fly on the wall on production. I wish I was.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything that you guys have both said. I I really had no idea what was going to happen when the scene first started. He starts playing, and then as soon as electric guitar riff hits, I was like, "Oh my god."
It's so good.
I was like,
So
the aspect ratio changes. You hear like a "bwah," and I was like, oh my god. And it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. And it's such a beautiful celebration of Black culture, the past, the present, the future, and beyond.
Yeah.
That it's moving. I mean, you literally have a guy with an electric guitar, and then 30 seconds later, two guys are crip walking, and I'm like,
It's so crazy.
I know,
I love it.
and yeah, and I was so moved, especially the second time I saw it, because it's gonna happen. So everything that happens beforehand just feels like an emotional build up until then, and then it hits, and it's like this release, and like I was moved. Like I had to wipe away a couple tears because it is so beautiful to see all of that on the screen together, and be able to witness all of the love and the care that everyone involved put in. And I feel like again, like in any other hands it might feel exploitative, but I think that the way that he handles it is just so masterfully done. And the way that Goranson uses the score throughout the film, but especially in here, to allow the characters to exert emotions, and I just think it's remarkable. Like, that scene is perfect. I wish I could replay it in my mind, like, every day when I need it. Just like, "Oh, here's the scene from Sinners, let's replay it."
Yeah.
And it's just but when the aspect ratio changes, that's when shit's about to get crazy in that movie.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I also think what's brilliant about that whole sequence, and I somewhat alluded to this earlier, but not in as much detail, as it is this exquisite celebration of Black culture as we've been talking about, and it is stunning. It is an incredible achievement, technically speaking, and emotionally as well. I absolutely love it. Also, it should be noted the juxtaposition of how that sequence ends with the barn essentially burning to the ground.
Ooh, I was
That juxtaposed moments later to Remick singing Rocky Road to Dublin, and his own celebration circled around all of these other Black and Asian characters that have assimilated to his party. Like those juxtaposing images are like there's like this saddening effect to it as well. So like as it is this incredible touching celebration, Coogler simultaneously uses it tonally on the other end of that spectrum once we get to the Rocky Road to Dublin scene. So it's this incredible fork in the road moment that Coogler gets to have his cake and eat it too once again. Like it has all of these meanings to it. So like it's just ravishing how it works in context of this film. It's really great. And something that you brought up, Isaiah, that I also want to mention, the sound design to this film is extraordinary. The mixing of those musical elements within the barn burning sequence should be noted. I totally agree with what you're saying there. That is fantastic. The sound editing of this film is also really impeccable. On a more sexy, seductive note, I don't know if you guys noticed this. I watched this in IMAX and the Dolby sound was screaming in my ears. The sound editing of the moment between Sammy and Pearline when their sexual energy is crystallizing, the sound editing there is remarkable.
Yep.
It does not hold back at all.
And again, it's dedicating to something that I really didn't know of. This just shows you my ignorance when it comes to some areas of horror. Vampires are very very horny, and I'm glad that Coogler did not hold back. Now, of course, you got to get creative because you don't want to go like too far to the point where now it's just like, all right, again, we're bringing another genre into this, if you know what I mean. But it's really creative and really just like showing but don't telling, or also relying on these people that he has recruited, these craftsmen, to be able to tell that story without having to like be in your face with it. He trusts his audience and he trusts his crew.
Yeah, it's incredible. And maybe the most blistering moment of the film in terms of the sound design is the car scene with Lindo's Slim character, where he's telling that story about one of his friends who got some money and was trying to leave Mississippi only to get caught at the train station where he was wrongfully accused of stealing that money and was lynched. Lindo's performance in the moment is heartbreaking enough, but the sound design and what they add to it is striking. Like the sound editing is so haunting and visceral with what they add there. It's just incredible.
I got PTSD.
This film just goes above and beyond. And
zone of interest, man. Like you don't see it, but you hear like
you hear it. Yeah, you totally hear it.
Yeah, I agree. The sound design, my favorite kinds of movies are the ones that you feel with like every sense that you have. And this movie is a perfect example. Like you said, you hear these things happening, and as you're watching the movie, you can kind of visualize it, so you can feel his pain. And I feel like it's an even you have an even deeper connection to the movie when the sound design is like top notch. You
Yeah.
remember those harder to digest scenes because you're like, "Oh, I could hear the slicing or, like, the rope tightening and it,
Hmm.
it's hard to process sometimes, and I think in a vampire film as well, sound is very important because, I mean, they're ripping people apart, they're
Yeah.
biting, they're drinking in, and, I think that, again, like, just everything about this movie is just impeccable, but the sound design, yeah, I have to agree.
It's so good. So
Mhm.
good. One of the last things I want to mention before we get to final thoughts, we've been talking about how this film is, extremely dense thematically, what it's trying to tackle. One element of it, in addition to it being this movie about assimilation, it's this vampire movie, it's a gangster movie, it's all of these things. It's also this movie about masculinity and femininity. And I know some critics have pointed this out in their reviews, but I do want to echo that because I do think it is important to this film, the depiction of masculinity in the sense that Smoke, Stack, and Sammy have these convictions, but they are openly loving toward each other and the women in their lives. Smoke and Sammy, especially, show a great deal of vulnerability in regards to Annie and Pearline, respectively, putting their lives on the line for them. And it's a big part of why this film is as romantic as it is. Stack's relationship with Mary is a little bit more complicated, but it also leads to one of the film's most grotesque moments. I say very complimentary.
Oh my
And
god.
on the flip side, the women of the film, while they play a role as far as desire goes, they each have their own empowered voice and make decisions that give them agency. I think of Annie and how her voodoo helps save the group at one point. She also makes sure that Smoke understands what to do if she is bitten by one of the vampires. Mary's pursuit of Smoke is full of resolve and passion. Grace was going to go out on her own terms with Bo, and we do see that unfold. Pearline sees that Sammy is fixated with her, and perhaps she uses that to her advantage musically, but she also engages with him romantically and makes a bold decision of her own at the end. I do think these women have agency. They bring a great dynamic to the film, and the performances here are excellent in
Mhm.
heightening that element. And while that might not be this part of the central nucleus of what the film is doing thematically, I don't think that Michael B. Jordan. I don't think that Coogler is forgetful of any of that either. I think that is still very much top of mind and is trying to include that among all of these other things. And I thought that was a great touch to the film in addition to everything else that he did.
Yeah, I
I
mean, the women are basically the anchor, I think, of the movie. They're
Mhm.
unmoving, they're hard fast, they're independent, and, from my standpoint, I love their characterization. I think Annie is the best example of this, especially
Mhm.
when Cornbread, wants to come back into, the juke joint, and
Yeah.
she sniffs out the BS
Yep.
basically,
mhm.
from the get-go, and
Yep.
without her I think without her in the movie, I just don't think a lot of those
Yeah.
sequences would have been as impactful, and
Yeah.
especially that scene that they share, in the 3rd act, well, right at the end of the movie, I thought that was so beautiful, and again, it plays to the masculinity and the femininity of, both of their characters, and yeah, Annie, I think Delroy Lindo, he does an amazing job, but, going to what was my favorite character, it is a tie between Delta Slim and Annie because I think that
Mm.
um, they both play such an integral part of the film that without them,
Mhm.
I don't think a lot of those sequences would have been, as heartfelt, or I wouldn't have connected as well to the film without them.
Yeah.
And I do
Mhm.
love how
Totally agree.
they implemented voodoo into the film
Mhm.
through her, and the way
Yeah.
that they introduced it in the movie, I thought was
Oh my
great.
gosh, that scene was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally
Um,
agree.
and, again, getting to, like, the steamier bits of the movie, I appreciate so much that Ryan Coogler, uh, showed it in the way that he does. Vampires are very sensual, characters, but, creatures, but also so are men and women. Like, it's
Turns out,
like
yeah.
humans, hello, yeah,
Yeah.
we're
Turns
sensual
out.
Really?
beings.
Really? We are?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and, especially from, the scene with Sammy and Perline where, she's like, give me a minute, let me get myself together," and he's
Yeah.
like,
I
"No."
just wanna taste it or whatever
Yeah,
he says there.
he's like,
Yeah.
"No, you're fine the way you are."
Yeah.
I think that it's very important, to
Yeah.
see that in a big mainstream movie because so many women are kind of insecure about that stuff, and
Yeah.
to hear it in a movie that, like, it's not a big deal. It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan
And boy,
Coogler."
do you hear it again,
Yes,
Oh,
sound
you
editing.
do, you do. You
but
do.
to
It's
piggyback
so
off what you
provocative. I love it.
to piggyback off what Meg was saying, I hate to sound like a broken record, but once again, I have to bring it up. This is something that Kugler has been building up and planted seeds for years. Other than of course, yeah, this ain't the first time Kugler's done a one take. He practiced that with Creed. But
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at back with going back to the women, when you go look back within the characters of his films, also externally, the people that he works with, it is crystal clear as day. I don't know if anybody noticed. Coogler has a respect for women and how they intertwine within his pictures. You see that within Black Panther and so many well written, well thought of females, even to the point where he even makes a decision for Wakanda Forever, the sequel, to actually pass the torch and have the ladies as the main faces and leads for that picture. And you even see within the external parts and who he works with, whether it's the technical work of the craftsmanship, even as far as female cinematographers going from, correct me if I'm wrong, from Creed all the way to Rachel Morrison to now Archipel, and how he allows, not even allows, but is heartful to give them a platform to express not only the things that were stereotypical of what they can and cannot do, but how they serve the purpose of the story and give their own stories. There's
Yeah.
that dichotomy both within the context of the picture, but also externally in the behind the scenes. And oh my God, JD, you said something that I think should definitely be mentioned. Lee Jun Lee does not have that much screen time in this picture, but everything that she gets, especially in that third act, I
Mhm.
know there have been some people online are kind of treating her kind of like it's giving Star Lord and Infinity War, if you know what I mean, where they kind of blame her for being a reason why so much crap goes down. But you understand where she's coming from, and I think is very much justified because she's the one that kind of motivates Smoke to be like, dude, like be a man. Like they're threatening our families. They are trying to come for us. They're trying to steal
Yeah.
something from us, and you know what that's like. You got to stand up for it. And at the
Yeah. She
end,
was the only one that Remick threatens as far as someone on the outside.
yes,
So it gives her agency in that moment that none of the other characters had.
recently, I'm just going to say it, of this decade so far, I genuinely do not. This is something I do not want to spoil because you got to see it for yourself. Probably the best use of fire I've seen from any film this decade so far. The
Mhm.
best use of fire.
Mhm.
And again, because of what she does and how she basically
Yeah.
defines how am I going to go about this
Mhm.
life-threatening opponent, and it
Going to
just
do it
feels
on
so
her terms.
on her
100%.
terms.
Mhm. Yeah. No, yeah, I love that in the film. I think Coogler handles all of that with incredible grace and yeah, I mean he deeply cares about these characters and he cares about the story that he's telling, which is why again I'm so willing to forgive how messy the film is at times as a movie because everything here is done with extreme purpose and it's done with elegance and thoughtfulness. And I love it. I absolutely love it a lot. All right, as we wind down here, let's get to final thoughts. So we'll go around the horn here. Meg, any final thoughts on Sinners?
Oh man. I was just checking showtimes for tomorrow, so if that tells you
Yeah.
anything, then there you go. But
Yeah.
my final words will just be thank you, Ryan Coogler.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. That's a good final thought. Yep. Isaiah.
I'm just going to make this very quick, just ramble off a few things that has not been said on my part. Delroy Lindo, we do not deserve him. His depiction of Delta Slim, I really didn't get into it, is marvelous. And just the way how he overcomes, because essentially he's a drunken character, but how, again, he overcomes those stereotypes, I thought was very great. The religious subtext in this film really did hit home for me, especially with the Sammy character who I relate to so much. Trying to look and see what else. I also didn't know that, and I mean, it's kind of like obvious, but I just want to give this fun fact. Arkapaw, if I'm not mistaken, is the first female to ever shoot a motion picture on 70 millimeter IMAX. So history being made from females in a Ryan Coogler film. Again, I love it. And overall, I still, even after everything that we've said, I don't think this movie is necessarily like a perfect score masterpiece. I still do take minor, not major, but minor issues with the way how the structure of the story goes about and its pacing and some of the editorial moments and decision that is done between these various genres that it's trying to depict.
And
But
even if you consider that major, Isaiah, I would understand.
oh,
Like I
no, no,
would
no.
totally get that.
It's not in that sense. This movie, the way how I feel about this film from like a grading perspective, really reminds me of how I felt with Oppenheimer, where like I'm not on that level, but you know what? If you want to call it on that level, I'm not going to debate against it because I think it's very understandable why people would go
Mhm.
so far. I'm not sure if this is
Fair.
going to make like my top 10 best movies of the decade so far, but it is for me from a directorial perspective, not from a screenwriting perspective, but from like a directorial on production, on set perspective, I think that this is Ryan Coogler's best film and the greatest achievement that he has done in terms of world building on set, as well as just trying to get, for what many people consider one of the most important jobs of a director, the best performances out of his actors. One of my favorite ensembles, probably will be one of my favorite ensembles of the year. I love this movie so much.
Yeah, I love it as well. I mean, I do agree with the sentiments out there or criticisms, if that's how you want to label it, as far as how disjointed it is editorially. But I see that as a strength, not a weakness here. The balancing of the domestation threads with the vampire aesthetics of the film, it is so all over the place. But I think it all connects to the film's nucleus with purpose and precision. And there's so much conviction to it that I think is really great. In my opening thoughts, I mentioned the execution of the film. Despite how each scene arrives to that moment, and it might be messy in getting there, but once we get there, I think each scene has a deep conviction and it gets to a point where I'm so immersed in this world and I am captivated by these characters and I'm blown away by the profundity of Coogler's messaging and how he's executing on that messaging that this whole movie, I'm just the meme of the guy sitting forward in the chair, like the whole time. That was me
In my
throughout the entire film.
generation, I could call that locked in.
Yeah, completely locked in. Absolutely. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And one thing that you mentioned earlier, Isaiah, that I just want to reiterate once again, I thought a lot of Jordan Peele's Get Out with this film, and I think that is another masterpiece. I love Get Out. That was one of my favorite films. I'm trying to remember where I had it ranked, but it was one of my very favorite films of the 2010s.
It's an all-timer.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you do see the parallels in terms of Get Out being this movie about white people becoming envious of black people and creating a scheme to steal their gifts and talents. And this film is about the dangers of bridging cultural divides when nefarious figures are lurking nearby with an eye on appropriating your art, and in this case, music. They're founded on very similar principles, with the difference being that with Sinners, I do think that Remick has this empathetic backbone that makes sense of his choices, as we talked about earlier. In the end, the assimilation he offers comes from a place of healing, at least from his perspective, whereas in Get Out, the scheming of the Armitage family is just purely racist. So, like in the end, they become different movies, but foundationally, they're coming from a similar place. And, I very much thought of that as well. And I guess as a last thought here, especially since Brendan isn't here, I do want to echo what he said on the main show this last week, is this being a celebration of music, in particular, the blues. I know he went into that quite a bit on the main show, if anyone wants to go and hear his thoughts on that. But I think he makes some great points as far as how the blues are involved here, how this becomes a love letter to the blues, and the music of the film is incredible. I mean, I have not stopped listening to the soundtrack for the last 4 days. It's all I've been doing.
Yep.
It's tricky trying to put your kids to bed when all you're doing is listening to this soundtrack. But I regret nothing.
They'll understand when they get older. No.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, they'll understand. I love this film. Again, I don't know if I'm being hyperbolic. Maybe I'm just being in the moment and letting my emotions overtake me. But I don't see a world where this isn't in my top 10 at the end of the year, maybe even in my top 5. I love this film a lot. And while I'm not optimistic, I hope the Academy shares the same enthusiasm that we had here on this conversation.
That would be so lovely.
It would be great. Okay, with that, if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, please leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. Just search at In Session Film. You'll find us. You can always email us, insessionfilm@gmail.com. All right, as we wind down, I want to give you guys the floor once again. Meg, where can we find your work online? Where can we find you on social media?
You can find my writing at wonderwatchlist.com and insessionfilm.com. You can find me on all social media as Wonder Meg.
All right. Isaiah?
You can find me on Twitter at Isabod13, capital I.
Yeah. Please go and give these guys a follow. Be sure to check out Meg's wonderful writing. I love your work, Meg, and thanks for all you do. For the site, insessionfilm.com, you can see a bunch of her work there as well, as she noted. Really, really great stuff. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate you all joining me for this conversation. It was a lot of fun. Do want to reiterate, we have another review coming out later this week as well. Brendan will be back, and we'll be discussing the film The Assessment, which I have not seen yet, but I'm looking forward to that. We'll have a review for that. Go and check out episode 633. We talk about Sinners a little bit further. We also continue our Best Picture movie series with the 1968 film Oliver. and that was a really fun discussion as well. We'll have a new Women in Session at the end of the week, so you can be on the lookout for that. And with the Academy news dropping earlier today, maybe there'll be a new Chasing the Gold. I don't know. The Academy just keeps dropping news randomly every week now, apparently. That is their thing, so who knows. But with all that said, thanks again, guys, for being here. Really do appreciate it. Thanks for watching, listening, everybody. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast.